Hi and welcome to this quick overview over some of the new features that have been added to the Mari extension pack channel exporter tool. Now the channel exporter obviously is nothing new, it's been added already inside of Mari extension pack 2.0 if I remember correctly. But in this release, Mari extension pack 3, there have been quite a few additions and as well as bug fixes to the tool that make it kind of worth just taking a quick look at it again. Now the channel exporter can as always be found under the export flattened as well as the export tool, and the difference there is simply that with export custom channel selection chosen from the regular export tool, it's going to export things non-flattened, so all of your layers will be exported separately, while the export flattened obviously exports everything flattened. Now you can, if we take a look at the interface, the first thing we're going to see is the base path and the template are now different. So they're no longer one long path field, so they're separate. You can reset your template to whatever was set on the opening of the project. So for example, if you made a change here, it's going to remember it between sessions, but you can always reset it, just like that. The template field is now respecting also the templates that have been set for layered exports as well as flattened exports. And if we take a quick look here, you can configure that under the new project path tool that is coming with Mari extension pack 3. So down here we have, for example, the template for non-flattened textures and the template for flattened textures. You know, if we go export custom channel selection, this is the template that's been set for layered export as well as the export flattened is disabled. And if we go export flattened, you can see this is the template that's been set for flattened exports and export flattened is turned on. Now, first things first, there's been a few bug fixes to the modified texture export. So now it's going to respect the changes made that have been made to your channel when you have a channel layer inside of the channel. So it's going to check if the channel layer has changed as well somehow, which hasn't been happening previously, unfortunately. It's a bit of an oversight. And there's also a bunch of other smaller bug fixes that should make it much more reliable, but as always, you will always need to export at least once with this option turned on in order for it to work. So now, for example, I would need to export my reference channel once, and from then on out, it would pick up changes. A few things as well down here. There's been a new feature that's been highly in demand, and actually that's the extension pack export is the only tool I know of inside of Mari that actually can do it. So you can now export your channel at a different resolution than it's at inside of Mari. So for example, my reference channel is set to 2K, or I think it's 2K, and now I can export it either at the full resolution, at the half resolution, which would be 1K, quarter, you know, and 1/8. And the minimum resolution, obviously, for Mari is 256 times 256, so it can't go beyond smaller than that. Also, one thing to note is that the export resolution, if you're exporting something other than full, you have to export flattened. So if I turn off export flattened and set it to half, it's going to complain, and because basically I would have to bake each layer separately down. So this is at the moment not entirely supported. So for the moment, you know, complete channels you can export at any resolution you want, but layered channels or layer exports you'll have to manage yourself. Another new feature that's quite useful is the ability to launch a post process, and we have two new things in here in the UI. We have the execute post process commands, which needs to be on in order for this to work, and then you can set up your post process down here, and you get this rather text-heavy dialog just to add as much info as possible. So basically, what it can do is it can run any command that you can run in your shell or your command line, so in your DOS command or whatever. And what that allows you to do is, for example, you can automatically run mip mapping on textures to make them render ready, or you can rename them or anything. So for example, in this case, I have the mental ray IMF copy, which is used to create .map files. And so this is in the executable. And then I have my arguments down here that I'm feeding to this command. In this case, I have a bunch of variables available that I explained in this info field. So for example, I have the full path, which is $full path, which gets replaced with the full path and file name including extension. And then I have the full path no extension, which, you know, is the same thing, except it doesn't have the file extension, because in this case I'm doing a .map replacement. And all of this stuff is actually explained as well, or there's a lot of samples in the help as always. So there's under the export custom channel selection, there's a whole section just on post-processing with some samples and stuff like that. But let's quickly go over it. We have 2 settings per channel and per file. So basically, per file in this case is what I would need for mip mapping, because it would run once for each export file. So if I export 2 channels with 10 UDIMs each, it would run 20 times. If I set it to per channel, it would run only once per channel. So in this case of 2 export channels, just twice. Then we have the max parallel processes. That is used just to kind of prohibit too many commands to run simultaneously and potentially lock your machine. So at the moment, you know, it would allow you a maximum of 16 processes to run at the same time. You can change that, but it'll default to twice your CPU count. So let's set this as a command and just export something. Just gonna, yep, that's fine. Just gonna check all this. Execute post-process commands is turned on, and I'm just gonna set this to export our patches. Oh, by the way, you can, as you might have noticed, you can also export selected patches now. It's been missing quite a long time, so you can add multiple channels and export selected patches for multiple channels, which will actually override the modified texture settings. So if you're exporting selected patches, I'm kind of assuming you know what you're doing, that you do want to export the patches, and so I'm ignoring the modified texture setting in this case. But let's just export this. And you're gonna see a bunch of windows pop up. Yep, that's it already. And now if I take a look inside of my reference folder, you can see now I already have my .map files created for me for each export texture. So you could, you know, use that straight away in mental way. Let's take a look at another example. I'm just gonna use a automatic renaming process. This is using the Maprenamer Perl script that I have on my website. So in this case, I only need to run it once after the channel has been exported. So I'm running it on the entire folder. So you just set this as a command. And I'm gonna export the same thing again, and maybe I'm just gonna change the folder just to make it more obvious. And then just export this. And take a look inside of the rename test. And now, because I specified a subfolder, I have my Mapbox naming convention already created for me as well. So this is quite useful, and you know, for all sorts of processes. You can run ImageMagick post-processing on it, a bunch of different stuff. You can also daisy chain up commands. So for example, I could have both these commands run after each other. So I could rename automatically textures, I could create map files for me, or whatever map mapping process you need for Arnold or Renderman or whatever. And you can do that this way. That's pretty much it for some of the changes to this tool. And as always, like I said, everything's documented. Take a look. Tooltips are available if you're stuck. Yeah, that's all. Thanks so much.